SVC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
The second business week of 2024 rang in the sounds of change as Flutter Entertainment announced that its long-term steward, Richard Flint, will leave the company's boardroom ahead of the firm's NYSE dual listing at the end of the month. Coincidentally, 24 hours following Flint's resignation, industry trade body the Betting and Gaming Council declared changes to its leadership and boardroom, announcing that Brigid Simmonds had stepped down from her duties as chair. Today, iGaming Daily reviews two high-profile executives ending their affairs with gambling and what 2024 will have in store for industry leadership navigating a fraught and ever-political industry backdrop. I'm James Ross, and on today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you by Optimove, I'm joined by Menmuir and Martyn Elliott to kickstart the week. How are you both doing? Did you have a pleasant weekend, Martyn?
Yeah. Already seems quite a long time ago, though. So, been busy this morning. So, yeah, looking forward to this, though.
Yeah, same. And Ted, good weekend? Anything interesting?
Yeah, watched Gladiators.
You watched Gladiators?
Yeah, I'm a sucker for 90s nostalgia, and I'm glad it's back, guys. We're already in a better place in 2024.
Did it live up to its original hype?
It's getting there.
Is it the same as the original? Any better?
It's too soon to tell. But it was a success for the BBC and worth my fee.
Perfect. Maybe in a few weeks we'll get your updated review.
Yes. iGaming Daily, we are pro Gladiators. Pro Gladiator podcast.
Cool. So before we delve into the topics, now's probably an appropriate time to mention the sponsor of our podcast. And this podcast, iGaming Daily, is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 56% of EGR's Power 50 personalize player experiences with Optimove. Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. And if for anyone who's visiting ICE in February, make sure you visit the Optimove stand, mention that you listen to our podcast, iGaming Daily, and you will receive a Amazon gift card. And I will be making sure I attend to that stand quite a lot in different disguises. But yeah, make sure you do. And yeah, back to the podcast. So in the first half, we're gonna focus more on the Flutter resignation, and then the second half it'll be more on Brigid. But I do need to ask. 2 resignations in the space of a week, 2024. Do these departures have kind of an underlying narrative for the sector in 2024? And Ted, I'm going to come to you on this one.
I think it's down to kind of your view and your take on the industry and where it stands at the moment. In Richard Flint's perspective, it is Flutter kind of losing their elder statesman of the board, a guy who's guided them through the kind of key integrations of the company becoming this FTSE giant from its merger, from the Paddy Power Betfair's merger with the Stars Group INC. He oversaw the growth of Sky Bet, which I often think in kind of its current kind of enlargement with Flutter, it's kind of forgotten about what a kind of powerful betting brand it was and what a game changer it was for the industry. In terms of the BGC, I think the other thing that we have to reflect on is that we're kind of reaching the midway point of what is a kind of very conflicted and very kind of disruptive decade for iGaming. And I think for a lot of executives, it has been kind of an exhausting process, these first 4 years of 2020 to 2024.
Mm-hmm. And kind of let's start, like I said, with Flint and Flutter. Why was Flint kind of held in such esteem in the industry, and kind of what were his main achievements? And Martyn, do you want to take this one?
Sure. It's difficult to understate the job he did at Flutter, at Sky Betting and Gaming through all those years. So let's see if we could do a brief history in 60 seconds on Sky Betting and Gaming. Sky acquired a group of internet companies for £300 million back in 2000. And the reason they actually bought it was for the Planet Football website, which at the time .com valuations were ludicrous. And what part of the group there was a small telephone betting operation, which eventually under sort of Richard Flint became leader of that betting operation for Sky. And he took it on to the sort of the red button betting in the old days on the digital TV. He was also sort of involved in the launch of Sky Vegas, which even today is the biggest, or in terms of player numbers, the biggest casino in the UK. And then, they halfway through his time there, they had a big turnaround because of changing technology. More people were interested in internet and mobile betting. Red button betting sort of died a death, so they lost that USP, but actually managed to come back significantly stronger. And I think they would tell you today that as well as Sky Vegas being the largest casino in the UK, in terms of player numbers, they also say that Sky Bet is the biggest sportsbook in the UK as well. So it's the world's, if you're counting the US as separate states, this is the world's biggest market. So to be biggest in player numbers on both facets is incredible, really. And also some of the commercial success from that initial business launch in 2000 for Sky. In 2015, they sold an 80% stake of the business to CVC for 600 million, and then Richard Flint continued in charge. And by 2018, the Sky Betting and Gaming was sold to Stars Group for £3.4 billion. And then obviously Stars Group merged with Paddy Power Betfair to form Flutter a bit later. So it's a huge success story. And there are lots of angles to this. But in terms of just technology, marketing, taking advantage of the growth of the Premier League to grow the brand and so on, it's very difficult to look at any major failings they've had along the way. It's been a great success story for the industry and a great success story for the wider UK tech industry as well, I think.
Ted, what did Flint kind of foresee for the industry? And call us up.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to add to what Martyn was saying. I mean, what's forgotten is what he was. Flint was a very good kind of taskmaster, and he oversaw Sky Bets from its enterprise stage to its M&A, and also through the various transitions of UK gambling. Now, one of the things that gets kind of leveraged at Sky Bet is that, well, it fed off the back of, having this big broadcaster by its side. However, I think he executed a lot of very good strategic decisions there, building a kind of Sky Bet's proprietary tech platform, focusing its operations like singularly in Leeds, and not dealing, again, very much like Bet365 and what we spoke about last week, not dealing with third-party platforms, taking focus to build things in-house. In terms of what Richard foresaw, I think in 2008 he was very open about the future challenges of the industry and in terms of its conduct and responsible gambling. He addressed an audience of executives at ICE 2018, and he kind of laid out the problems that, as it stood, online gaming and especially online casino was going down the course of being viewed as pretty much in the same spectrum as quick loans, which were a huge problem back then, and that the industry really needed to act kind of in the front foot and invest in new technologies to improve RET and especially on intervention, and actually put some academic thinking behind how it deals with problem gambling, and also expanded stakeholders. And I also think that he should be praised as being a CEO or an executive who was actually very much in the front line of this debate and didn't hide within kind of within its intricacies. He was always willing to speak to the media about this. He was very open about Sky's strategy with and what it was trying to achieve through its sponsorships and promoting safer gambling.
Mm-hmm. And now he's left. Do you kind of see him returning to gaming at any point? Either of you, actually. Martyn, we'll go with you first.
I mean, maybe. He has a lot of investments in smaller businesses that he's made. He has a number of non-exec roles outside the industry. Who knows? He might have reached a point where the golf course is an attractive way of life. But in no great surprise to anyone, Star Sports are actually running a book on the next permanent CEO of Entain. And after the news that he'd resigned as a non-exec at Flutter, Richard Flint is now the 3-1 favourite.
So maybe we won't see him on a golf course too soon. And Ted?
I don't think so. I think if you're an executive, and especially if you had success in gaming, you'd be coming back to a very, very different industry, and one where there's a political maelstrom that's being felt. And I think from having seen Richard speak on it, this apolitical backdrop is draining, and I think that he feels that his skill set would be in a better suited to a different sector. And there's also Gladiators on TV. And it's perfect time not to come back. Yeah.
I can't wait for him to have his little, what do they call them? The two Darth Maul looking
Pugil sticks.
Can't wait for him to have his little pugil sticks and start fighting another combatant on a little pedestal. But that's for another day and another podcast, hopefully. We're going to take a quick ad break, and when we come back, we're going to still talk about resignations, but we're going to be talking about Brigid Simmonds.
Brazil, a global economic powerhouse, deeply passionate about sports, and now home to one of the hottest markets in gaming. And we're giving it the full SBC treatment. Join industry leaders, market experts, and all the major players in the country for 3 days of content, exhibition, and epic networking at the first ever SBC Summit Rio.
Welcome back. Like I said in the first part, we're going to talk about Brigid Simmonds now. And Ted, I'm going to come back to you on this one just to provide a overview of leadership changes announced by the Betting and Gaming Council.
Yes, so shortly 24 hours after Richard Flint announced his resignation, we had the Betting and Gaming Council, the UK's industry trade body, announced that Brigid Simmonds had decided or had ended her affairs as chair of the trade body, and that she will be replaced by existing CEO Michael Duga, who will step up to the chairman, and he'll oversee the final stage of the industry and its representation in the gambling review. The BGC have executed an executive search for a new CEO to take over kind of the day-to-day duties of representing the trade body. And the announcement kind of, again, going back to what we were talking about at the start of the podcast, I kind of see it as it's surprising in a sense because the industry is yet to, especially in the UK, is yet to get to to find out its resolutions. But at the same time, it's been a very, very draining kind of 4-year period for everyone involved. So I wasn't surprised by Simmonds' resignation.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's quite a shame. Anyone who's listened to the podcast knows that I'm a fan of Brigid. She was the first person when I was doing my master's, my dissertation, to kind of offer me an interview when she was at I believe it was the Pub and Beer Association. And I was struggling actually at that time to actually get an interview and get my dissertation off the ground. But she agreed to do it. And from there, it kind of spiraled on that I got quite a few big names in the industry. Tim Martyn from CEO Wetherspoons agreed because Brigid was part of it. And then our careers kind of followed a similar path where I entered the gambling space at SBC, obviously, and then she was at the BGC as well, and did a lovely interview with her at SBC Summit Barcelona as well. And I've always got time for Brigid, so wherever Brigid goes next, I'll go. I'll keep following her. But Simmonds, she kind of saw kind of a lot of changes, many social responsibility changes, such as the RET funding, gaming controls, game designs, advertising code. But were any of these actually recognised by the government?
Well, that is a good question. I think a lot of these changes were going to come in the change to regulation and so on, and the Gambling Commission has been demanding some of these things as well as we've gone along. The big players in the industry, the serious players who are investing in the future and in safer gambling and so on, have been pretty strong at getting ahead of the game on some of these changes which they recognise were going to be inevitable. So I think it's a toss of a coin. I think the government and the Gambling Commission has recognised some work has been done, but you could argue, the changes were coming with a government enforced or industry doing it first. I think it's just sensible steps, a lot of these things that have been taken.
Yeah, and Ted's already alluded to it, that she was doing a lot of this while the Gambling Act review was going on. Like, how difficult of a job did she have representing the sector during this troubled time?
Well, hugely. Anyone who reads any sort of newspaper or the BBC and so on will have seen the huge amount of pressure coming from groups who are, how should I put it? Let's be kind. Let's say they want to see significant change in the industry, significantly more change than the industry is willing to give up, and probably more than the government wants to impose as well. And those pressure groups have really got on top in the sort of the PR war. They've been telling this story about sort of gambling-related suicides, and also big family stories about people who've lost a lot of money because of gambling addiction and so on. And set against that backdrop, those emotions that everyone can understand, as a PR tactic, it's faultless, near enough, really. But it's so difficult for the BGC to come back and with any sort of argument against that, because it seems, if you start relying on facts and figures and so on, it seems a little bit inhumane almost in the face of the arguments that have come. So it's been the public side of the lobbying has been extremely difficult. We don't know, of course, what the conversations behind closed doors with ministers and regulators and so on have been. They may have been more fruitful, and they, in many ways, are more important. But certainly, public side, I was not at all jealous of her role or Michael Duggar's role either.
If I can just add, I think we've got to be reflective of the BGC's journey as a trade body. Now, I think when they came in 2019, they had, it was quite a simple strategy to represent the industry. However, I think the debate and the discussion on gaming has meandered into a lot of separate areas and a lot of conflicting areas that are present at the moment. The other thing is that I don't think that you can just judge it in terms of it's a win or a loss. I think the outcome, no one will be satisfied by the outcome, but we are now at a point where the industry just needs some form of resolution to go forward and to understand its terms of play. And again, this is going back to it's been a very exhausting process for everyone involved.
And just the final question to kind of wrap up the podcast: does the appointment, and this might sound like a really really mean question. It don't mean to be that way. Does the appointment of a new BGC CEO really matter, considering we're going into a year of unknowns for UK gambling? And Ted, I'm going to come back to you and then we'll finish on Martyn.
I think it does. And I'm actually going to credit the BGC, because if we go back to 2019, this is a very fragmented industry, and it's achieved something that was needed, and that was to kind of unify the voices and unify the kind of interpretation of the industry. And now the government knows who it's dealing with. And actually, it's put forward a very, very strong case for the industry in terms of how big it is, but also its contribution to the UK economy and the taxes it's paid. And it's a much clearer voice. So I think the duties of that new CEO will change, but they will have some significance. So I'm not that kind of bleak on the BGC as a trade body. It's done the job it needed to do, representing us.
Sorry, if I've been looking at you pointing at me there, James, in the studio, I would have known you wanted me to speak at this point. I agree with Ted, really. I think we're likely to see a change of government before a change in the regulation is finalised. So, Keir Starmer's government, and, it will be Keir Starmer's government. There's no point suggesting it's going to be anything else at the election. They'll have different priorities. I can't see gambling being a big priority for them. So we need a good relationship building with that government. We need someone who will stand up and make the case again for gambling, because it's probably going to be, it could be another 2 years this goes on for now, the review, and before we get any finality to it. So, I think it's important to have that right figurehead for the industry out there.
Well, and when that right figurehead comes and all the latest news comes from that, SBC News will be covering it as it breaks. And Ted, just before we end the podcast, you want to just give us a brief roundup of some of the big news that's hit the SBC News website today? Yes,
please. If you go in today, you will be reading about Google's latest update on RMG apps that have been allowed for India, Mexico, and Brazil, and the BHA's response to the Parliamentary Committee announcing its scheduled date for the discussion on affordability checks and how it impacts horse racing. So please do tune in.
Yeah, and all those articles that Ted mentioned, I will leave in the description below. I'll leave a link, along with any articles relating to the topic that we've discussed today with Flint and Brigid Simmonds' resignations. But apart from that, this has been iGaming Daily. Martyn and Ted, thank you for joining me today. And tune in tomorrow where you hear my voice again for another episode of iGaming Daily. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.